Kellogg sat in the day-room chair and glared at the cube. She tried sorting it naturally and managed one side quickly enough. After the first day, she had managed two sides at once, yet the other facings remained a mess, and all attempts to sort them only ruined what she accomplished. That led her to conclude that perhaps the facings had to be exactly as original, with certain colours on opposing sides. With that in mind, she'd gone back over with Deshin to look at the other cube in the library collection, and checked. Sure enough, the two sides she completed were out of order. It had been a setback, but she was certain that a calm, rational and disciplined Shilvanti mind could master any problem. Regardless, the stickers didn't look like they'd peel off and go back on without a trace. She glared at the cube some more. In her mind, she assaulted it with lasers, particle beams, tungsten kinetic rods, even willing it to spontaneously combust under her withering gaze. The cube sat in her lap, unrepentant. The most galling thing was that she knew there was a solution. A math genius like one of the twins could probably sort it out on their computer, but that felt like admitting defeat. Somehow, with only a dozen or so twists, the cube had been scrambled. That meant with every twist she gave, she was either one step closer, or, goddess forbid, one step farther from having it solved, and she had no way to know which was which. It was maddening. Thankfully, it was the night before Shell, which meant that she had extra time for once. Her homework was caught up. For a wonder, so was her other project. And the day room was quiet, save for Belder quietly working on an essay across the room. "Hey, Lark. Hi, Belder." She looked up, seeing Melondi and Jaxmi walk in, heading in her direction, and set the cube aside to freeze in the depths of the deep, adding unkind thoughts for whoever had invented the thing. Their arrival gave her a moment of respite, and the cube sat quietly, properly chastised. "Hi, girls." She stood and stretched, as Belder looked over and rose to join them. "Going down to the beach?" "Maybe later. We're meeting Deshin there, then dropping by Professor Warwick's rooms," Jax explained. "He has a picture of the outfit he wants made, and Desi says she's pretty good with the replicator." Mel peered down at the cube and raised an inquiring eyebrow. "Yes, I am still working on it," growled Lark petulantly. "I started off just poking it after I got my homework done, but the damn thing is addictive and I still can't figure it out." "It looks interesting," nodded Jaxmi, pulling out her Omnipad and scribbling a note. "I wonder if they're copy protected. Is it fun?" "It's challenging." Lark shot the cube a look of vexation. "I want to set it on fire, but I suppose it's fun, as long as you like a good challenge. Oh, hey, Desi." "Hi." Deshin wandered in, looked at the cube, and grinned. "As your advisor, I should tell you that beating your head against some of these human things may lead to madness." Lark stuck her tongue out. "As the keeper of the cube, I already know." Desi grinned and bowed her head in defeat, while Lark bumped fists with Mel. Belder's Omnipad pinged, and her eyes widened as she looked at the screen. "Hee!" she squealed, bouncing up and down on her toes. He messaged, oh, Empress, he messaged me." "Huh?" Mel and the other girls looked over, as Belder capered around the room gleefully, pumping her fist in the air. "It's the human boy I told you about, the one we met at the restaurant and I got to take home," Belder grinned, waving the Omnipad at them as she danced over, before hugging the pad to her chest. "He messaged." "Oh, wow." Desi's eyes widened. "Your third time out there and you scored a date? As your advisor, we have got to go out there more." "Goddess, Don't keep us in suspense. Make with the details, urged Melondi. Caslin told me he's cute, but that's not the good stuff. Fess up. Well, his name is Liam Classen, and he's staying with family out in Shargo Academy, about 40 minutes away, and... Wait, interrupted Jacksme. Her eyes wide as saucers. There's a school with humans our age only 40 minutes away? Yes, Shargo Academy. It's not very large, and he said there are only a few, but yeah. Belder bobbed her head. Anyway, he snuck out to get some food for himself and his sister. I met her, and girl, she was mad when we got back, but she was pretty nice after I explained I was seeing him home. Hold on, you meet him, get to take him home, and you even getting good with his big sister the first day? Lark asked in astonishment. Yeah, I think she was just worried sick about him, so I was on good behaviour. And I was in one of my best dresses too. Belder bit her lip as she thought back to the day before. She looked me over, but I think she decided I was all right. So he messaged, Jax prodded. What did he say? More important question, blurted Deshin. Why are you keeping him waiting for an answer? Belder blinked, looking down at the omnipad still clutched to her chest, and held it up for the other girls to see. Message from LK. Hi, I was kind of in the doghouse, but I wanted to message and say thanks for bringing me home. Hope kinda jumped my case about it, but I get it. You didn't have to, and I had fun. Anyway, I wanted to get out this weekend. Hope says that if I'm with you, she thinks it's okay. Are you free sometime? Belder hesitated, biting her lip. What should I say? Duh! You've already kept him waiting, Kellogg said, nudging Belder in the ribs. When a boy asks you if you're free, you say yes! She's right, nodded Jacksme. Sounds like you done great with his sister. That's huge. Don't keep him waiting, but play it cool too. Right. Don't keep him waiting. Play it cool. Belder stared at the pad before looking back up in distress. But I'm from Willist. I don't even know my way around the capital. Well, he's from Earth, so he won't either. Professor Warwick was talking about what he wants to see when he gets off the campus, so maybe offer that. Deshin frowned in thought for a moment. Anyway, just ask him what he'd like to do. Make it his idea, you know? R.E. Belder. Sure, I'm free. I had fun too. What would you like to do? Belder looked at the message before hitting enter. Is that okay? All the girls looked at it and nodded. Taking a gulp, Belder hit send. Seconds ticked by. Nervous glances were exchanged. After a minute without reply, Belder exhaled. Do you think the professor would tell me more if I come along? I mean, I talked to him a little bit after class today, and if he... The omnipad pinged. Belder grabbed it back and read while the others crowded around. R.E. Liam. That would be awesome. I don't know where anything is, so I guess it might have been dumb going out to the restaurant we met at, but bacon. And I met you, so no regrets. R.E. Liam. Is there any place where we could go dancing? Dancing? Asked Melondi, as the girls looked at Belder. You lucky Turrox, Kellogg grinned. Bring him home safe and you'll win even more points with his sister. I like dancing, Belder said with a smile, though after a moment she frowned. But I don't know anywhere to take him. Anyway, we're not allowed in the clubs till we're 15. What should I tell him? There was a general murmur of concern as they looked at the screen. Then Jacksme snapped her fingers. I've got it. Take him to Orinka Plaza. It's a year-round street festival and there's dancing all the time. A lot of good places you can take him to eat dinner, too. Oh, exclaimed Lark. That's a great idea. I've never been, Melondi said, as she looked questioningly at Jacksme. I haven't either. Deshian glanced at Jax curiously. What's it like? It's great. There are all sorts of things to do there. Street artists and dancing and merchants all afternoon and evening, enthused Jacksme. Oh, you'll have to keep an eye on him, but it's a lot of fun. You won't have any problem showing him a good time. Well, don't keep him waiting, Deshian urged, gesturing frantically at the Omnipad. She's right, seal the deal, nodded Jacksme. Set the time and see if he says yes. Ari Belder. I know a place you might like. If I pick you up early, we can go into the city. What about tomorrow at 3? After hitting send, Belder shivered. What if he said no? What if he said yes? What do I even wear to this thing? She asked Jacksme, her eyes going wide. Relax, it's casual, so nice but not fancy. I know just the thing so you'll fit in, said Jacksme easily. You're going dancing anyway, so just focus on makeup and hair. Oh, wow. You were all going over to see Professor Warwick? Asked Belder pensively. He didn't say much before. Could I come along and ask for his advice? Are you kidding? You've been out to the restaurant 3 times and scored a date with a human. Jacksme looked at her like she was crazy for even asking. Of course. I want to hear this. Me too, said Kellark, dug into her handbag to check for her Omnipad. There was no way she was going to miss recording this conversation. Belder's Omnipad pinged, and she froze. Oh, goddess. I can't look, she whispered. You have to look, Melondi cried in utter exasperation. You got this far, Belle. Besides, if you don't tell us now, we're going to kill you. Belder pried the Omnipad away from her chest and looked down at the message queue. Ari, Liam. Sounds awesome. See you tomorrow at 3. Hee! Belder shrieked in joy, jumping up and down and stamping her feet. I have a date! I have a date! Tom rested his head on his hand, looking at the photograph as memories called to him. You remember when we had this taken, love? 2003 on the Oriana, right before we left England. Just a special treat for us. England was a good tour, wasn't it? You looked so beautiful that night, and there I was showing off for the Brits in my Air Force tux. It was a dress dinner, after all. I know I could have worn a regular suit. I never told you, but I really wanted to look my best. Remember how people looked at me when we walked into the dining room? And that couple asked what I was wearing? That was fun. Tom blinked as hot tears started to roll down his cheeks, and he took a slow, shuddering breath. After a moment, he swiped both cheeks with his palms before rubbing his eyes. He cried often over the years, and here he was, not done yet. He probably never would be. After a moment, no new tears came, and he started again. I never told you how much that evening meant to me. It was the only time I ever wore it off the base, so it was one of the few times I got to show off for you. And you looked so beautiful in... Fresh tears came, and he let them fall. You looked so beautiful in that dress. I mean, we seldom went anywhere fancy on our own. You were always easy that way. You made a good life for me, and so... He paused, sniffling for a moment. You made a good life for me, and I hope I looked good for you that evening. He paused and smiled. I mean, there we were on a cruise ship off Spain, and who knew you'd be seasick the rest of the trip? But we had that night. Anyway, he swallowed. Would you believe I left it back home, and I'm thousands of light years away, and here's the thing, love. There's someone else I want to wear it for now. Tom closed his eyes, rubbing the tears away. He didn't need to see the photo. He knew it by heart. It was the words that he had to get out now. I think you'd like her a lot, honey. You know, I've seen her look at this picture when she thought I wasn't looking. She's never asked, but I know she's seen you. I wish that you were here with me. Wished it every day for all these years. He drew a deeper breath. I still remember the first time I saw you. I thought I was all done, but now it's like life has thrown me a second chance at happiness. I know you'd understand, but I just needed to say it out. The sob came, and he choked it back. Just needed to say it out loud. I miss you. Breathing came easier. He sniffed, opened his eyes, and looked at the photo. He kissed a fingertip, touched it to the frame, and nodded to himself. He'd made his peace with grief, and here he was in love again, but the loss would never be gone. And now, I'm going to wash my face. A couple of my students are coming by to have a look at this, and see if they can make me another suit. They're curious, you know, and I don't know what I'm going to say if they ask about you. I just thought that it would help if I talked to you before they get here. He stood and walked to the bathroom, splashing some hot water on his face. Fuck it. As long as I'm not actually crying, would they even know? He asked his reflection ruefully. He'd never been very religious, but it didn't matter if there was an afterlife. Either way, he had to live as if this was his only chance. Having consigned himself to a colourless existence, life had given him another shot. Time to look good for someone again. 3 miles away, in surveillance control, Captain Priambriona drew a shuddering breath that threatened to become a sob. She felt tears watering her eyes, but sternly blinked them away as she closed the audio and minimized the video feed on Tom Warwick. Grizzled veteran as she was, Sergeant Diani stoically performed her work, though tears rolled down her cheeks. The objective was away from any main cameras, and Priam dropped the zoom feed before sucking in another breath. She stared hard at the feed and tried to hold her emotions in check by force of will. The sound of Sergeant Yala openly weeping wasn't helping. Tom Warwick hadn't been just a subject number for a while, any more than the others whose lives intertwined with that of the objective. While their training kept things professional, the members of Surveillance Pod 4, 5 and 6 knew them as people now. It had only been natural that she pulled up the audio when Warwick started talking to himself. The operational thought process held that familiarity enhanced surveillance. If a subject began exhibiting even minor erratic behavior, familiarity could enable a team to detect and log it early. That was vital in the event a subject became dangerous. That didn't mean the pods weren't allowed to feel for their subjects. You couldn't accurately evaluate someone while devoid of empathy. They could see the subjects as people, but as seasoned professionals, there was always one final wall of objectivity. Familiarity was even fun at times. They watched the classes and followed along. Practical humanity was everyone's favourite, but Priam had been following economics to brush up her skills. With nothing but time on their hands to watch people living their lives, there were running bets. There were sporting bets on who would win the next diving competition, who was best on the team, or who was going to do best on exams after Desi had been taken off the chart. There was a poll on whether Disala or Sethir was the better diver. Priyan even had a side bet with Setar and Salani on if or how soon Sethir was going to punch Disala's lights out, with Salani offering 6-1 if Disala had another go at Desi before class. There were the running speculations on the student show. If it would be anywhere as good as the circus videos they'd watched swiped copies of, and if Jax would get silk in time. There was talk about what the point of that cube was, and a few mutters about giving it a try. Sergeant Kalani in Pod 6 apparently wanted to reach through the screen and take it away from Kellock, and was running models of the thing during the dark hours of third shift. There was the personal profiling. Everyone was rooting for Deshin, while opinion was still divided on Kellock. While the girls weren't overly fond of reporters, Kellock's stock had gone way up. Even the grumbling about the consequences of a hack piece abated, once they'd read her early drafts. Lark couldn't know they were tapping her wireless, but damn, the girl needed to update her firewall. News about Belder's date circulated like wildfire. There were even plans to send one of the field teams out to Human Food and see what the fuss was about. During third shift, the objective was usually doing homework, sitting in the day room with her friends or fast asleep. That made the nights Mivere stayed over at Tom's the most popular time of the week. Of course, by regulation, any intimate footage of an Imperial citizen had to be deleted after proper review, if nothing dangerous or seditious was found. Captain Solani had already fired off 3 emails, appending that regulation regarding humans. The regulation needed to cover rolling footage going well over an hour and include every room. As for the proper review, the girls were now drawing lots. The surveillance control room could only hold 6 people. For trained professional pods like theirs, it worked. With the camera footage augmented by the 3 pods working the field, it was the most comprehensive surveillance possible, short of a pod of death heads physically sitting on the objective. The circumstances didn't make her feel any less wretched about having just invaded another person's pain. Tom walked downstairs after the buzzer rang. He'd been expecting Jaxmi and Deshin, but not Belder, Kellark and Melondi. They were all easy company, however, and as they settled down at one of the tables outside, he gave them a welcoming smile. He still possessively held on to the framed picture as he joined them. Right, so, anyway, thanks for doing this, he said, looking over to Jaxby and Deshin. I appreciate it very much. Do you have the picture, Professor? Asked Deshin, glancing surreptitiously at the frame in his hands. Yeah, that is, yes. Anyway, before you see it, I want to get this out quickly, he said, looking down at it for a moment, before offering it over to Jaxmi. Yes, this was my wife. She was killed on the day of the landing, and it wasn't your fault, so no apologies, please. Anyway, this is the best picture I have of the outfit, so I'd appreciate it if you take very good care of it while you have it. Jaxmi looked at the photograph for a moment, studying it and searching for something to say, before passing it to Kellark. She looked at the photo a moment, then glanced up at him, head tilted to one side. He chuckled. Yes, my hair was all dark brown once. Kellark passed the photo over to Deshin, who studied it carefully. We don't have to take it with us, sir. If you don't mind, I can take a picture with my Omnipad. Duh. Tom closed his eyes and shook his head ruefully. You know, I was born into a world without smartphones and Omnipads. Anyway, sometimes I still don't make the connection. Go ahead. And I mean it. Thank you, girls. He watched Melondi and Belder, stealing as many covert glances as manners would allow. Melondi was a bit better than Belder, and their curiosity made him smile. All right. Go ahead and say whatever you want. I'm sorry. Everybody picks up scars in life and some don't heal. I wasn't trying to be melodramatic, so go ahead. She was very pretty, Blondie said quietly. Yes, she was. Under the table, Tom dug his thumbnail, hard into his forefinger, but gathered himself. So, what can I do for the rest of you ladies? The girls all looked at Belder with expressions ranging from envious smiles to outright prompting. Sir, I need to get your advice, please. I have a date with that boy from Canada. Belder swallowed, blushing a furious blue. Tomorrow. Tom sighed inwardly, thinking of being a teenage guy turned loose and shrill with an innocent co-ed. More than a few of the guys he'd known at that age would have run amok with a girl like Belder, probably sleeping with her the first chance they could before... He really likes music, Belder added hopefully, and he asked if we could go dancing. Well? Tom digested that. Canadians are fine and inherently likable people. Belder exhaled at the positive verdict, and the girls all nodded, leaning forward eagerly. Okay, so you want practical advice on dating a human boy. Fair enough. Let me think about this a second. He tapped his chin pensively. Half of the things I would have told my daughter either don't apply, or I have to gender swap boys and girls. You have a daughter, sir? Blondie raised her eyebrows. I didn't know that. Ah, I did. It was, She died with my wife when... Tom stopped at the look of horror that washed over the other girls and quickly held up his hands. Look, dating advice. We're on to dating advice now, right? Horror at the gaffe dwindled into wary apprehension, and Tom pressed ahead. Okay, so you know something about what he likes. That's good. When you're dating a human, find out what he likes. If he's interested, he'll want to know what you like too. The girls nodded, and Tom settled into thinking it through. Use his name. Make eye contact, but don't stare. Just showing interest is a big one. If you're going dancing, you're probably going to have physical contact, but when you aren't, do not paw him. Humans are a lot bigger about personal space than Chilvanti, so just offer to hold hands if you're walking around. I mean, don't let him get lost in a crowd, but if you're just walking together and casually, offer. If he takes you up on it, you're doing fine. End of the evening, let him try and kiss you. It's kind of a first date thing, but remember that he's a human. If he wants to, he'll make the move. Yeah, I know that's the wrong way around to you, but trust me. Personal space, again. Don't worry if he doesn't, since this is all complicated, but you can bet he will on a second date. If you get a meal, don't touch his drink if you can help it. That got some looks. It was a big thing for girls in my world, and while he probably won't be thinking about it, it may be in the back of his mind. Anyway, it can't hurt. So, what do you know about him, Belder? He said he is from a town in a place called Alberta. Very pretty place. That's it, he's from there. He said he wasn't in a big town, but he loves music. His parents brought him up on it, and he loves to dance. Belder supplied. He's here on Shill spending time with his older sister for a year. She's working over at Sworgo Academy. Wow. Did not know that. Okay, he likes music. Tom sorted his thoughts. I have my old Rush t-shirts upstairs, though you probably don't want to make a copy of that. I can pass you the files before you go. Might turn into something you can ask about or name drop. If you want to get him talking. I expect Rush is probably more his parents' speed, though. Why didn't you have more modern music? Asked Jacksme. Modern music blows goats, Tom muttered in English. Deshin practically choked on the drink she'd been sipping, while Belder said, Blows goats? Tom instantly revised Deshin's next English lesson, and waved his hands at Belder. Do not say that. I just don't like most modern human music. Why? Jacksmy asked. I mean, I really hope to go to Earth after I graduate, so I want to know anything current. We know you love music, sir. What's wrong with the current stuff? Tom frowned, thoughtfully. Okay, this may not be useful, but when I was your age, I had a girlfriend who made it her thesis, so I can give you a practical answer instead of just an opinion. You know how I like the Beatles? The girls all nodded. Okay, so they were back in, 45 of your years ago? What I call the 60s, and it was a great time for music. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Fleetwood Mac. The decade that followed it was good too, with acts like Boston. Anyway, I think Boston's where the problem hit. It wasn't the music, it was the music business. For instance, there was a company called Motown Records. Back in the 60s and 70s, a company would find an artist they liked, and if they thought they had potential, they'd work with them for a few albums and try and see how they developed as artists. Motown was even known for the Motown sound, with artists like Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, or Marvin Gaye. That's why a lot of bands from the 60s and 70s, like Fleetwood Mac, The Who, or The Stones, were still around 50 years later. Basically, companies would groom and help artists. Marvin... Jacksmy looked up from where she'd been furiously jotting down the names. Marvin Gaye. And let's maybe save him for later. Tom bit his lip for a moment. Marvin Gaye was smooth as silk, and a song like Sexual Healing was going to get around eventually, but not because of him. Anyway, the problem was that the companies got greedy. They started looking at their artists like property, and if a performer didn't have an instant hit from the start, the companies started dropping them rather than helping them develop. Sounds like the consortium, muttered Kellogg, and the girls glowered with dark sympathy. From what I've heard about the consortium, that's pretty accurate, Tom nodded. Things got really bad with Boston. They were incredible, but they got hit with so many lawsuits by companies that they just gave up. They only made 3 albums as the original group, but each was a gem. It made for bad music too. Artists didn't want to get dropped, so they made songs that weren't much more than repeating catchphrases. Easy to stick in someone's head, but no actual lyrics, like you got with music groups like Boston, hardcore artists like Bob Dylan. There are still a few creative artists like Prince who popped up, but a lot of music turned into sound bites you could maybe use to sell soda pop, fizzy kids drinks. That's why there were bands from the 60s and 70s playing for decades. Meanwhile, I'd have had a hard time naming you 5 good artists from after the mid-80s that lasted, and the cost of a concert became outrageous. That makes sense, but what a terrible thing to do. Jacksmy poked a few notes into her Omnipad. Someone should make sure that isn't still happening. It was, Tom shrugged. He had wandered off dating advice, but the girl seemed interested. That's why there were rock operas by some of the greats, but you'll never hear one made out of the music of Culture Club. Well, I hope not on this side of hell and before I'm dead and buried. Deshin spoke up then. What's a rock opera, Professor? You dropped back into English. So I did. I haven't done that in a while. Serves me right for getting carried away. Tom thought for a second. An opera is a musical. It's a dramatic story told in music. I love those. The word is nepask. Melondi gushed in excitement. Do you have any? Tom ran a quick thought check over his favourites. Of course he had soundtracks of We Will Rock You, Chess, Evita and Mamma Mia. He also had video editions of Cats, Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables. Cats would probably be incomprehensible, while Chess, Evita, Les Mis and We Will Rock You all featured governments somewhere between collapse and outright revolution. Yes, I have a few. Let me think about it, he hedged. You might like the one about a ghost in a theatre. Professor? Kellogg looked uncertain. I don't want to ask this the wrong way. I like the Beatles, but the thing I don't get is why other human musicians seem so angry. Some are and some aren't. It's not about anger, it's about passions. And yes, those can sometimes be angry. You might like ABBA or Fleetwood Mac. Tom bit his lip a moment in thought. ABBA was tremendously popular, and they mostly sang love songs. They even did 2 of the operas I was just thinking about. In any of our languages, joy doesn't make human music bad, any more than anger makes it good. I suppose I could show you Angun or The Who, but I'm getting way off the point. The Who? No, The Who. Tom paused and decided not to go down that rabbit hole. So, anyway, as far as current music, it was getting a little better. Your date might listen to something called indie rock, since I don't think anyone can dance to The Who or Sabaton, unless it's a rave. Def Cab for Cutie is probably a reach, but I have albums from groups named Imagine Dragons and Kings of Leon. They may not be his thing, but he'll know them. Tell you what, I'll go upstairs and grab their files and bring back that concert t-shirt too. Could you bring me back the Marvin Gaye? Asked Jacksme. What's your personal favourite? Asked Kellogg attentively. Wow, that's sort of like picking out which goddess you like best. They're all great to me. I mean, Rush? They were the gods of the North. That was a nickname, but they earned it. I think my favourite is Fleetwood Mac, with Rush and Pink Floyd tied for a close second. It depends on my mood. Why them, sir? Kellogg pressed. Here I thought my interview was next week, Tom grinned wryly, as baffled confusion flashed across Kellogg's face. Fleetwood Mac. Well, it wasn't just music. It was their whole lives in the music. The band was 2 women and 3 men, and they hit it big in the 60s. Over time, they got married, got divorced, had their ins and outs, leaving and coming back. But through every album over 50 years, they chronicled their whole lives. No one else ever did that. And good. Lindsey Buckingham's guitar solos, Mick Fleetwood on the drums. The new bands were alright, but that was watching people who'd honed their skills for a whole lifetime. Every single concert, you knew it wasn't over until they played Songbird. Fleetwood Mac had substance. Anyway, he clapped his hands together and smiled. I want to thank you two for making this suit. I know you're busy with the outfits for the show, but I really want to dress up for this one. He paused, leaning closer. Tell you a secret. I'm kind of sweet on Professor Pelavon. The girls traded uncertain looks. Belder blushed, but gave him a gentle smile. That's not exactly a secret, sir. Operation Sable Crossing was pure textbook. The LD-326 star cluster was barely worth the name, with only 3,000 stars scattered across a sphere, just under 400 light-years across. Over the course of 10 weeks, it was the mission of Task Force 9 to sweep the cluster. Its divisions would cross from system to system like a wall, moving from galactic east to west, updating charts, tracking anomalies, but primarily dedicated to sweeping for pirates. Fleet intel indicated a growing presence operating out of the cluster, making the sweep worthwhile. Around the K-class Orange Dwarf, known only as LD-326K0418, the ships of Cruiser Division 3 dropped into normal space just over the charted plane of the ecliptic, and realized they had hit the jackpot. Even as the 2 Azant-class light cruisers slid into formation around their big sister, the Falker-class heavy cruiser High Lightning, optical data was already tracking a solid hit. A small moon 2 light minutes inside the gravity limit was showing a substantial installation, along with an orbiting vessel, Tactical flagged as a Venga-class bulk cruiser. Vengas were just the kind of ship favoured by pirates feeding off Alliance arm deals, and it had no business being anywhere in LD-326. With 2 minutes before the speed of light granted their quarry return telemetry on the division, High Lightning scrambled her complement of 6 exo dropships, tasking Spectre Flight with a hard assault on the base. As the smaller units raced ahead, Crew Div 3 came to flank speed. Kaslin and Kamara were sitting with their backs to the dayroom wall. Lynn had set aside her sheet music and was focused on listening to one of the groups Professor Warwick recommended, while Mara picked over a growing lineup of performers for the student show on her Omnipad. "See? It's orchestral like the Beatles, but more," Lynn muttered, as the new track started. "It is, but the singer's range is important too. This one is singing over 2, maybe 3 octaves," Melondi said thoughtfully, as she looked at the picture on the Omnipad. "That's not as wide a range as Queen Mercury, but this one is a tenor, and he's just belting it out all the time. I don't know how easily a human voice can do that, but I know it would be hard for us." "Now I like taking off, don't like burning out. Every time you turn it on makes me want to shout. We keep getting hotter, moving way too fast. If we don't slow this fire down, we're not gonna last." "I thought it was Queen Freddie," Jacksme said, as she joined their huddle. While their discussion was going over her head, she understood the entertainment industry as a beast with many heads. What the professor had said about it being mismanaged before the landing was interesting, and Jax was writing down notes to send to her Uncle Jemsy. There might be an opportunity, and anyway, someone needed to get the circus on tour. "Cool the engines. Red line's getting near. Cool the engines. Better take it out of gear." Over on the couch, Desi leaned in to check her work, while Mel looked at Tom's picture. "It's Freddie Mercury of Queen." She'd been sketching out the pattern of the mess dress on her Omnipad, which proved a lot easier, since it turned out the professor brought the awards worn on his chest. All she had to make was a template, check the colour palette and textures against what the professor told her, and she could quickly get a rough example ready for corrections. "I'm no fool, gonna keep it cool, take it day by day. We won't know where we might go until we take it all the way. Cool the engines, going over the line, going off the dial, running out of time, and it's getting wild." Alone in her room, Kellark lay back on her bed and listened. She had translated the printed lyrics, but the first time she only listened to the singers in their native tongue. While not a singer like Melondi, she had the professional training to appreciate a gifted voice. It was getting late, and she left the song the professor mentioned for last. "For you, there'll be no more crying. For you, the sun will be shining. And I feel that when I'm with you, it's all right. I know it's right." Thousands of light years away, Cruiser Division 3 updated his tacticals when a second bulk cruiser rounded the cusp of the moon in low orbit. While there was concern on the bridge of the High Lightning, the odds were still heavily in the division's favour. It would take at least 4 Vengas to match High Lightning and her 2 smaller siblings. Tactical was firming up on the base defences, and the intel was looking good. If anything, the base was larger than expected, but the defences remained minimal. It was a sizable depot, and eradicating it would decrease regional piracy for years. Crew Div 3 pressed deeper into the star's gravity well, as Tactical showed the 2 opposing ships beginning to maneuver. Playing it through a second time, Kellogg read the lyrics translated into Shrivanti and tried to piece them out in the cadence of the song. The meaning was clear, but the singer's voice seemed to be reaching out with a passionate longing. To you, I'll give the world. To you, I'll never be cold. 'Cause I feel that when I'm with you. It's alright. I know it's right. There are times when the universe simply blinks. When the unexpected happens without rhyme or reason. You might call it luck or happenstance. Fleeing before the enormous vanguard of Task Force 9, 3 Venga-class cruisers dropped back into normal space on the edge of the FTL limit. Already at battle stations as they fled from the chase, they planned a fast evacuation of the crew and most important cargo from their support depot. Their tacticals quickly locked in on the alert from their base. Now over a minute inside the star's FTL limit, the only thing standing in their way were the 3 ships and light attack craft of Crew Div 3. The Shrivanti ships were just entering the weapon envelope of the 2 cruisers they left on station, and weren't far outside their own. Being in the right time and place was pure chance. The trio of bulk cruisers took the initiative and moved to close the range. Kellogg liked the song. After making a reminder to find more music and information on the group, she played the melody a 3rd time. And the songbirds are singing, like they know the score. And I love you, I love you, I love you, like never before. On the bridge, Commodore R.D. Perarez stared at the tactical and tried to maintain a picture of calm for her crew. The ships under her command were more than a match for the opponents either before or behind her. Now inside the weapons envelopes and engaged both ahead and astern, the division was not a match for both. Alarms rang over the High Lightning, while the light cruiser off her starboard reported heavy damage. The Ascent-class light cruiser off her port had already been reduced to free-floating scrap, which exploded when her core drive failed. Perarez knew she was in a losing battle, but if High Lightning could force her way past the base, and the remaining opponents still in orbit, there was a chance to disengage. However, she could not, would not disengage without Spectre 1 on board, and as High Lightning came about on the best intercept course and speed, she was taking damage. Spectre 1's pilot was taking a desperate gamble, having turned back to intercept High Lightning before going systems dark while on a ballistic course. Meanwhile, the 3 surviving ships in Spectre flight were doing their best to draw as much attention to themselves as possible. It was a desperate gamble, but the range to intercept was falling. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot R.D. Perarez had. For the last play, Kellogg just listened. She had the sense of it now, and she let the music wash over her as she lay in bed. And I wish you all the love in the world, but most of all I wish it from myself. And the songbirds keep singing, like they know the score. And I love you, I love you, I love you, like never before. High Lightning was little more than floating wreckage. Despite running dark, optical tracking on one of the 2 surviving Alliance cruisers still picked out the ballistic trajectory of Spectre 1, and fired 3 of its P-29 Grazer mounts. The dropship flared briefly, and died. As Kellogg Guton leaned over and turned off her bedroom light, so ended the life of its pilot, the commandos on board, and Exo-Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Calandri. She had been more widely known as Princess Calandri Tassu, Duchess of Shill, PR, KP, second-born daughter of Empress Kamalesh Tazu, and designated heir apparent to the Shulvanti Imperium.